Content warning. The Wards of the State podcast may contain material that may be harmful or traumatizing to some audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Hey Light Shiners, welcome back to another amazing episode of Wards of the State podcast. Before we introduce our next guest, make sure you guys are leaving us a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, and also make sure that you are subscribing to us on Spotify. You can watch the podcast episodes. The video episodes are available on YouTube. The YouTube is just going to be my name, Karlos Dillard, and also make sure you are checking out the links in my bio for all the latest things that we are doing. Right now, we just got back from the West Coast side of our book tour. We went to Las Vegas, we did Portland and Seattle. We still have to hit up LA and Texas on the west side of the coast. But we are taking a little bit of a break for the summer, guys, just to give ourselves a break, but we will be finishing the book tour in the fall. So make sure you keep your eyes out for that because we may be coming to a city near you. And any other updates, both books are on the TikTok shop, guys. I know we've been really excited for book 2, Ward of the State Ward of the State Adoption. That is available on the TikTok shop. And if you guys have been missing the lives, we've been going live Monday through Friday again, 9 to 3 on TikTok to sell the books and also educate and advocate for adoption reform. So if you are listening and you haven't already made sure that you follow me on social media, please do so. All the links are going to be in the show notes as always. So without further ado, I do want to move on to our next guest, Abner. How are you doing, Abner?
I'm doing really good today. How are you?
I am fantastic. So Abner, tell us a little bit about your adoption and how did you get into the child welfare system?
Yeah, so I don't really remember. I've been in the foster care system, or I was in the foster care system since I was a toddler. I had the first time I remember, I believe I was 4, and I had my younger brother as well. And I remember we were taken away in the middle of the night, and from then on in foster care until I was 13. So yeah, I know the reasons we were taken away was because my parents were addicts. They were addicted to meth. My father was the cook and seller, and my mom was a user. Well, my father was a user as well. So I know the reasons why. But every now and then they would get custody back, but it would get taken away within like 6 months. So I was in foster care from as early as I can remember until it was 13.
Okay. And did you stay with your brother during the system, or did you guys get separated?
It was kind of hit or miss. I actually have other siblings as well, but they weren't born the first time I was taken. So my fully biological brother, and we share both mom and dad, we got to stay together occasionally, but we were separated pretty frequently. I do remember when I was old enough to really start to understand that we were going to get separated, I would start to advocate for ourselves. And occasionally I was successful. There were a few times where I was able to convince the foster parents to also take in my brother, or we could go to a group home together. In fact, I actually grew up in Arizona. I don't know if you're familiar. I don't know if it's even still open, but there's a group home out there called Crisis Nursery. I lived there several times, and there was a time where I was able to be there with both my biological brother and my half-brother, but my half-brother was really young, so he was on the infant side of the group home, and I was very lucky and privileged that the staff members there, they gave me the key code so I could just sneak in between the older kid side and go to the, yeah.
So kind of explain a little bit about your experience in foster care that you do remember.
So I mostly remember never having belongings. The few belongings we did have were always in a trash bag. I know that's a pretty big stereotype that most people at this point know about, but yeah, we don't get luggage, so trash bags it is. I have a dissociative problem, so I dissociate a lot.
You okay?
can take a breath. So I mostly remember the moments where we're taken away. Those are usually the more traumatic ones, and so they kind of stick out. My siblings were yelling a lot, crying a lot, and I remember being parentified very early on. I wasn't the oldest sibling, but I was the oldest sibling that was like living together. My older siblings were my half siblings, and they got to stay with their biological fathers, so they got to kind of stay out of the system. But so I remember, just constantly meeting new faces, constantly learning how to adapt, constantly never knowing what was happening, who I was going to be with, who I was going to see, what school I was going to go to. I remember at one point counting, and I had been to over 22 schools. So I guess it kind of just depends. I have a lot of stories I tell when I'm with my friends, like when I lived with the lesbian couple, this is what happened, or when I lived with the elderly couple, this is what would happen, or if I was in the respite home, this is what happened, or I also had like a rich family that took me in at one point, and boy did I want them to adopt me.
Mm-hmm.
So like I have a lot of anecdotal stories about specific foster parents, but yeah. Sorry, if you have a more specific question,
So
I can get into it.
yeah, no worries, no worries. I know it's kind of a weird thing to be at, like, hey, what about your childhood? So in your response when you signed up for the podcast, you said that there were some specific things, like some conversations that you wanted to talk about. So being special needs, did that ever affect you? Did you ever see that in foster care? Did they ever like lie about your abilities or exaggerate your needs as a child to get more stipends? Or what was your experience with that?
So it turns out I have had autism and ADHD my whole life. I did not get diagnosed with those when I was a kid. My
Mm-hmm.
siblings were also in the same boat because it's genetic. So all of my siblings are also somewhere on the spectrum. Of course, I never got diagnosed, so I couldn't get any accommodations that would have helped me. My brother did get diagnosed with ADHD, but he also got diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder, which I don't know if you've done any research into, but essentially I don't want to call it a fake disorder, but it's not, the symptoms are more related to having an autistic meltdown than they are to
Mm-hmm.
actually being oppositional, or like so my brother had a lot of tantrums.
Yeah. Yeah, my adoptive mother would say they used to say I had ODD, but it was really just CPTSD,
Yep,
and just a reaction from my CPTSDs. So
exactly.
it wasn't that I was trying to be defiant. I literally just couldn't function because
Yeah.
of trauma.
Yeah, and you're also trying to protect yourself. It's a completely
Yeah.
understandable reaction, but when you're a kid, you don't have agency over yourself. And so the parents who are seeing this, or the foster parents who are seeing this, are thinking like, well, they're just acting out and are being difficult. And usually they didn't come at it from a place of understanding and trying to help. They just wanted the kids to act right. So can you restate the question again so I can get back to my point?
And at one point you did get adopted, correct?
Yes,
Or
when I
no?
was
Yes.
13. Yeah.
So when you were 13, so that's more along the lines of like, so when you got adopted from the foster care system, you were already considered special needs. So did your adoptive parents ever, use your being special needs to get money? And how did we call that stacking in the system. How did you figure out that they were doing that, and how much were they getting, do
Yeah.
you think?
So I never learned figures on what they were receiving, but my adopted parents, they adopted me, one of my biological brothers, and then they adopted two other girls. And once I separated with them, that's where I stopped following. If they've adopted more, I have no idea. But I remember coming home from work, because I've been working since I was 14. I remember coming home from work one day, and there were papers all over the dining room table. My mom was not sitting at the table at the moment, but I heard her like walking towards the area. But I was looking at the papers on the table, and I could see all kinds of forms stating like temper tantrums, eating, like struggling with eating with food, not doing well in school, being antisocial. So I remember her filling out those forms and stating all those things. It's kind of weird when I think back on it, because they were technically correct, but I don't feel like that is how it should be going about. It shouldn't just be, oh, the parent writes on a form all these things that they think are wrong with you, and then you get more money. We should be going to like get diagnosed so we can get
Yeah,
accommodations
and I
and
actually
help.
also just And I also just spoke in Seattle at the what is it, Academy or so the Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychology. And I was speaking to them about over medication and over
Mm-hmm.
medicating and taking more time with their clients and their children, especially adoptees and foster youth, and speaking to them and not just pushing pills or pushing pills as a solution. I understand that sometimes Western medicines and like antidepressants and psychotropics can help, but we don't need just that to be the first solution. And a lot of the times they really didn't have an understanding that these parents were using these doctor's appointments to get more money just so they could say that you had more emotional problems. So I think it's
Yes.
really important for you to highlight
Yeah.
that. So you were 13 when you got adopted. So what do you say when because people say that's about an age that kids should be able to consent. Did you understand the legal process of what you were about to do when you were 13?
No, I didn't. I didn't know anything when I was 13. I just and at the time I was very especially when it's from such a young age that you've been tossed from family to family, you get tired of that. You want to make roots, you want to stay in one place. And so the parent and my parents had not at that point done the worst of what they were going to do to us. And so I didn't know who they were really when they wanted to adopt us. I don't think 13-year-olds can fully grasp their I definitely knew that, my parents were on my biological parents were on drugs and they were not capable of taking care of me. I understood that. I did not understand the adoption process, what it was, and what it would eventually mean for me as an adult. When I turned 18 and I tried to get my medical records and even just my adoption or foster care records, they wouldn't release them to me. So I had no way from then be able to accurately give family medical history. So I've had several like DNA tests done when I go to the doctor so that way they can like figure out if there's any like genetic markers that I need to be aware of, which is really expensive. And for the most part we just kind of guess. But I have a lot of I actually ended up finding out that I have a lot of genetic conditions that could have been diagnosed a lot sooner had I had access to that information. So yeah, no, I don't think 13-year-olds know what they're getting into when they say, "Yeah, I want these people to adopt me," especially because we usually have such like people-pleasing tendencies or like a desire to want to fit in with the community, and if these people are going to say and pretend really well that they want me in their community, then I, of course, say to a judge, "Yeah, I want to stay with them." But I also
So
don't remember even
did
getting
your
asked
adoptive
that.
parents were your adoptive parents your foster parents, or did they just adopt you from foster care?
They were my foster parents first.
Okay, and so they fostered you first. And how was that
Hmm.
experience with them? Like, did it change from fostering to adoption? Did they treat you differently after the adoption was finalized? Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
So before we were adopted, um, they weren't quite as mean. I mean, there were still signs, but I overlooked the red flags. They weren't quite as mean to us. They didn't quite do as many manipulation tactics, and I think honestly part of that is because they didn't really know us very well, and they also didn't really attempt to get to know us very much either. So this actually kind of goes into the thing I wanted to talk about with identity, in that growing up in foster care, when you're trying to please other people, you suppress your own needs and your own identity so that way you can fit in and be accepted by these other people. And so I did not know really a lot about myself or my own interests or anything like that. And then when I was adopted by this family, it kind of got even worse because once I did try and I started to be a teenager, I want to learn who I am, try things out. I found out very quickly they didn't like the things I was trying out. I was very into metal music. I liked all things kind of goth, and it was not a phase. I still do. But they were religious extremists, and so any interest in that they considered to be demonic. And so I had a lot of exorcisms done on me. They would take vegetable oil, they would say a prayer over their
Wow.
vegetable oil, Yeah, they'd say a prayer over the vegetable oil to anoint it and call it holy oil, and they'd put a cross on our forehead, and then the whole family would lay hands on us, and my mom would pretend to speak in tongues and pray the demon out, and then after about 45 minutes she'd like be all sweaty, and I think that worked. I don't think you had the demons anymore. But then of course a week later it would come by and she'd be like, those demons never left you, and then it'd be back to square one with the exorcism and stuff. And that really happened with my younger brother a lot as well too, especially because of the tantrum. She thought that he had a violent demon that was going to, who even knows, she had a lot of delusions. And so there was no real ability for me to even build an identity, because every time I tried to do that, it would be demonized or criticized. There were a lot of times she'd ask me like, oh, what do you want to do when you become an adult? And I was very into writing poetry at the time. I still am. I'm trying to get back into it. I'm working on it with my therapist. So I would tell her all these things I wanted to do, and she'd always have a reason for why I could not do the thing that I had picked out that I wanted to do. For writing, it was, oh, well, that's a very niche, like you have to be an excellent writer, and even people who are really good at writing, they spend their entire lives writing and they never get published, so maybe you should have a backup. Okay, well, that's fine, maybe I should have a backup. And so then I'd pivot, and I thought, I really want to help people who are in situations like me. Maybe I could be a therapist. Oh, well, I think your heart is too weak for that. I think you're going to end up crying and making it all about yourself, and you probably shouldn't try and help other people. It's going to be too close to home for you. Okay, well, maybe I can help other people. I want to be a forensic scientist. Oh, well, I don't think you do well with the blood and the gore, even though horror films were my favorite. And she used to do exorcisms over me if I would laugh at a scary movie. So just every time I had something I wanted to do, it was never good enough. So I never really got to figure that out. And then as an adult, those people-pleasing tendencies didn't go away. I hadn't quite unpacked all that trauma. So I'm still continuing to make decisions based on other people's opinions and not my own. And so it took me a really long time to figure out what my values and my ethics were and to start living by that. So I feel like I am very far behind in my own identity and knowing who I am than other people are. I could have had my career solidified at this point if I had had someone supportive. And in fact, even the thing that I was going to go to school for, I couldn't, because they wouldn't even co-sign a loan for me to go to college. I got accepted. I had a 50% grant, but I still needed like $12,000 more, and so I needed to co-sign.
And a lot of folks don't understand that you need your parents' tax information even to get loans.
Mm-hmm.
And you need their tax information and their sign-offs, and that's crazy. So and you said that this is how they treated all the children in their home, right?
For the most part, yeah. They also did a lot of, they would pit us against each other. I ended up being the golden child a lot and the scapegoat quite a bit. And the other kids they were a lot more, they weren't as people-pleasing as I was. They were very much, they got into the system a little bit later. So they knew who their family was, and they knew who they were a little bit stronger than I was. And so they would push back a lot more. And because of that, there was a point, actually, I remember telling my siblings, I said, hey, don't tell me anything. Don't tell me your secrets, because our mom will make me tell her, and you guys will get in trouble. There was one time my sister had tried smoking weed, and she told me about it like a year after she had tried it. And I feel really bad about this, but I remember slapping her and being like, why would you do that? Like, you're going to be in so much trouble. And this is such a large secret, but I remember I asked her, I was like, did you do it anymore? She's like, no, it was just the one time. And I said, okay, good. Like, I'm not going to tell, but you can't keep doing it, because if I catch you, I'm going to have to, like, I'm going to get in so much trouble if I don't tell our mom. And then, so I was really good about it. I actually didn't tell that secret, but 6 months later, she found out anyways. And then she found out I knew, and I was sleeping. It was in the middle of the night. It was a school night. It was like 1 a.m. And I hear her yelling. I hear my mom yelling upstairs, and then I hear her stomp down the stairs, and I knew she was coming into my room. And she busts the door open, flips the lights on, and then like pulls the covers off me, and it's like, you knew that your sister did weed and you didn't tell me? And I was like, it was over a year ago. Like, what am I supposed to do with something that happened over a year ago? And so we were all grounded. Everybody got grounded for 2 weeks. We weren't allowed to go out. We weren't allowed to have our phones. We weren't allowed to do anything. That was also like they were very big on punishment. They would spank us, uh, but most of the time it was grounding, which for me, I was an introvert. So a lot of times the groundings they weren't the worst things for me. I would just read, and that's all I ever wanted to do was just
Yeah.
read anyways. So I just sit in my room and read, but then they caught on to that, and then I wasn't allowed to read books anymore.
That's how my adoptive parents were. They grounded me from like games and movies and TV, and then I was like, okay, I'll just read, and I actually
Hmm.
really enjoy reading. So then they grounded me from reading. So then like I just found other things to enjoy. So eventually I would just have to be stuck in a room with nothing in it, just
Hmm.
looking at four walls locked inside, and I was like, this
Yes.
is horrible.
And I think that absolutely contributed to some of the dissociative like problems I deal with. Like, okay, if you have nothing else, if you literally have nothing that you can distract yourself with, what are you going to do? You're going to go inside your own mind and create a whole world and just live there because you can't just stare at a wall. Yeah. So the she definitely had different ways she would play all of the kids. I was the oldest, and so I was in charge. And if the younger kids messed up, I was in trouble. I would get grounded. I would have to redo their work constantly as well. There was a lot of we had to do a lot of chores, which I call them chores, but really like I don't know what to call it when your whole entire weekend is spent deep cleaning a house from head to every weekend. There you have to not only just pick up after yourself and just like do like dishes or sweep up the floor, but it goes beyond that. Like you have to get on your hands and knees and you have to scrub the grout because the grout has to be pristine. It has to look exactly the way it did when they first got it put in. You have to scrub all the baseboards. You have to do the light fixtures, the ceiling fan, every nook and cranny. And then also like she had a
Wow.
couple of adult children who lived with her as well. And so like she treated them a lot differently than she treated us. They would not be involved in the cleaning. They would clean up their own room and that was it. But her older daughter lived on her own. She was married. She had her own kids. We would go over to her older daughter's house as well, and we would have to deep clean her house also.
She had you cleaning her daughter's house too. Dang,
Mm-hmm.
she had
Mm-hmm.
some employees.
Yes, my friends actually called me Cinderella for a really long time. They knew before I was willing to admit it to myself that I was in an abusive situation. So I'm trying to think of more examples and get back on topic, but I've kind of I've lost the train a little bit.
No, you're okay. And this is the perfect time because we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, guys, we're going to listen to more of Abner's story. We're also going to hear some suggestions that they think would improve the system, like reallocating resources. So, Lightshiners, we'll be right back. And when we get right back, we'll finish Abner's experience in the foster care and adoption systems. Welcome back to the show, Light Shiners. Make sure you guys are leaving us a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-star rating reviews on Apple Podcasts, as well as subscribing to us on Spotify. Also, make sure you're sharing with your family and friends, and make sure you're checking out my links on my bios to support. And if you haven't grabbed book 2, Ward of the State, Abort the Adoption, grab it. It's a good read, guys. We've got some great reviews on it. So, without further ado, I want to reintroduce Abner and their experience in foster care. So they were sharing with a little bit about some religious trauma, some isolation that might have caused disassociation. Abner, do you think that because your foster parents adopted you, and we talked about them stacking, we talked about them, exaggerating behaviors to get more money. Do you think that this money could be better reallocated? And do you think your birth parents could have benefited from these services or resources?
Absolutely. So, my biological mom struggled with addiction. And I think for a lot of kids in foster care, that's pretty typical. I feel the money that we are giving to foster parents outside of very extreme situations where there is severe abuse happening, I feel that money could be reallocated to the families, to the biological families, to be able to help with rehab or therapy, or a lot of people turn to drugs simply because they don't know how to cope with their own traumas. So I'm a huge advocate of therapy. I have been in therapy since I was in the military. That's something I continued to have. I fought to get a therapist instead of be on medication, and now when I'm outside of it, the VA thankfully still pays for me to have therapy, and I go see a therapist every week, and I have for years. I think it is incredibly important for people to have that. And so I feel that money would be way better reallocated to helping for mental health resources. And even if it's not drug related, if it's just because some people can't make enough money, why are we taking their kids away and giving them to another family to give them money? Just give the biological family the money. Instead, they need help with bills, they need help with groceries, whatever it is. That money can be used so that way they can stay with their family and be more stable. They just need help. They don't need their kids ripped away from them just because they're struggling.
Early in the conversation, you said that you disconnected with your adoptive family. What age was that? I know you said that they wouldn't help you with college, so I'm assuming that they didn't save any of those stipends for you to help you along or help you become an adult.
No, as I turned 18 and they didn't give me anything. They took the cell phone that they had given me, they took that away. They had bought me a car when I was 17, so that way I could go to work. They took that away. Funny little anecdote, it blew up on them 2 weeks after they took it away from me, so that was really fun to hear about afterwards. Sorry, let me get back on my train of thought. Very sorry.
Yeah, your adoptive parents after your Did they pay
They
you
did not.
anything for
Yeah,
you?
they paid me nothing. They gave me nothing. They literally I was able to pack my clothing and get out of the house. The day that it happened was the day that I asked for them to co-sign a loan for me to go to college. My mom said that she would have to wait until our dad got home so she could talk about it with him. And then very quickly, actually, it devolved from there. She didn't even wait. She kept barging into our room afterwards to just nitpick something with me and my sisters. I don't like swimming. She really wanted to go swimming. And so when she barged into the room and she's like, I want to go swimming. I know Abner doesn't want to go swimming, but do you two want to go swimming? And I was like, Mom, I'm just trying to get some loans. Like, that's what I'm trying to do. And eventually she said that she needed to talk to me in private and told me that I needed to either get my act together or leave. And after it was a much longer conversation than that. And she made some very specific points. And it was just one of those moments where I realized, like, she does not love me. She does not care about me. And if I continue to stay here, this is just going to be more of the same. And so I decided, well, I've been homeless before. I've lived in cars before. I've slept on the streets. I've dumpster dived before. I'll do it again without her.
Yep.
And so I said, I think I'm going to leave. And her jaw dropped and she's like, you can't be serious. And I said, I'm going to leave. And I asked her, I was like, when do you want me out? And she said, right now. So I called my best friend. I said, I need you to come pick me up. Gathered all my stuff, left. She gave me nothing. I had actually left a few things there on accident and I was not allowed to return to get them. My siblings were no longer allowed to talk to me. They would, of course, sneak a couple of messages here and there, but they would get found out and they'd get grounded and it was a whole thing. I found out she was still hitting my siblings and I tried to report her to CPS, but of course there was never ever
That sounds
what's
a
the
lot
word?
like my situation, but I was like 15 when it happened with my
Mm-hmm.
siblings. Evidence or whatever. They
Yeah,
just don't
there's
they don't
never
care,
evidence. Paper trail,
honestly.
that's the word. Yeah, they don't. There was never a paper trail. And so which is funny because I remember them telling and I told you on the live when I was a guest, like I remember very clearly them telling my caseworker that they do spank us. And my caseworker with her big old key ring in her hand just shoved her fingers into her ears and said, la la la, I don't hear you. They can't stay here if you spank them. And so yeah, the caseworker knew, but when I became 18 and was ready to finally, address the issues, there was no paper trail. And so it was the start of a paper trail, but I was already out of the house at that point. So there could no longer continue to be one other than I said it the one time and I'm not with them anymore. So I have no evidence of any
And
future times that
have you
happens.
seen them have you seen or spoken
So
to them since?
she reached out to me months later to apologize. I listened to her apology. It was very self-righteous. She wanted my forgiveness just so she could feel better about herself. And I told her I forgave her. But then it kind of ended up being the same thing. I would hear from my siblings that she was continuing to still do the same stuff. She was still being just as vindictive and manipulative. So I cut ties with her. I didn't want, she still tries to reach out every now and then, and I just have no interest in continuing a relationship with someone who's only ever going to apologize so that way they can feel better and not actually change their behavior. So no, I don't keep in contact with my adopted family. And I
Listen,
don't keep in,
sometimes no contact is the best contact.
it is, it's been a lot less stressful not having them around. They did actually make my life a little bit harder when I was trying to join the Army because I needed their information to fill out paperwork. And I was in the recruiter's office and I called up my dad to get some information from him, and he pretended like he didn't know who I was. And I kept telling him, I was like, your child, Abner, your child, like, and he's like, don't know who that is, and hung up on me. And it wasn't until the FBI had to go to them because
serious?
I was, yeah, the FBI had to go to talk to them so that way I could get a top secret clearance for the job I was going to do in the military. And then all of a sudden they changed their tune, and I'm a wonderful child. They're so proud of me. They can't believe I'm doing this. And like, it was so fake.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Abner, I appreciate you coming onto the show and sharing. It's so crazy how much a lot of adoptees' experiences are so similar, especially with religious trauma. And then, you know, with crazy adoptive mothers, it's always the mothers usually. I don't know why, but I really appreciate you. I always ask every guest this: what's one piece of advice that you would give a foster youth or an adoptee? What's one piece of advice you would give them if you were speaking to them with your lived experience now?
My advice to them would be to search out for your own community. Find the people who actually do uplift you and support you and encourage you, and stick with them. They don't have to be your adopted family. They don't have to be your biological family. Whoever it is that is showing you love and care and concern, stick with them.
I love that. Well, Abner, thank you so much for coming on the Ward to the State podcast and sharing your lived experience as an adoptee. I hope that you continue to shine your light and continue to find out who you are and do things that make you happy, like you're saying, and figuring out what your life is going to look like even for now in the future. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Can I say just one more really quick thing?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. On the identity part, I did end up figuring out my morals, values, and ethics, and I'm living by them a lot more now. It turns out I was a trans agender kid, pansexual, which never would have been allowed in that household. I remember actually having a lot of arguments about homophobia with them. And so I work for a nonprofit helping trans kids, and it's just a joy. And so, yeah, I finally found who I was, and now I'm doing work that is meaningful and fulfilling.
That's amazing.
So
you're the adult that you needed when you're an adult that you needed when you were a kid. We love that.
Yes.
We love that. Well, you know what? Keep being that adult, Abner, and I can't wait to have more kids being able to listen to your experience and know that they're not alone. So thank you for sharing it. And light shiners, like I say every week, always shine your light, because you never know who might be listening and you never know who you might inspire. So until next week, guys, always shine your light, and we'll see you next time.